Okay, welcome to the Here podcast. We're thrilled to have Bryce Herrera. Herrera.
Yeah,
How do
yeah.
you pronounce it?
Herrera. I
Herrera.
was joking earlier, telling you, that's the real like Mexican way to say it. I can't roll my R's though, so
All right.
it sounds better you saying it. Yeah.
All right. Well, Bryce, the way that we got connected was through the Utah Business Week article that was published, about a month ago or a
Yeah.
little longer. And you were featured and quoted in that article, and you reached out, connected with us, and now here we are. And what a cool way to connect.
Yeah. No, I like I said, about a month ago I got asked to speak as a quote unquote expert about men's health and men's
Nice.
mental health, and at the time I didn't honestly know of your guys' group.
Yeah.
And I thought I should probably do some research a little bit because I know there's a lot of men's groups out there nowadays.
Yeah.
That are forming in the last so many years, and I'll be honest, some of them I've heard of that I'm like, I don't know if this is, as a therapist, like the
Yeah.
healthiest or
Yeah.
whatnot, but I checked you guys out, and I was impressed.
Cool.
I love the stuff that you guys do, and so I thought we need to connect.
Awesome. No, and that means a lot. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. And
Yeah.
so, give our audience just a little background. You mentioned you're a therapist, but
Yeah.
tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I've been in practice for 12 or 13 years, I want to say.
Cool.
I'm a clinical social worker by trade. That's what I got my master's degree in. Like I said, I'm a psychotherapist, so I mostly do therapy, outpatient therapy with folks.
Cool.
I have a couple different jobs or gigs. I work for the University of Utah. I'm not sure if you've heard of the Huntsman Mental Health Institute. It's sort of the psychiatric branch of the University of Utah Healthcare. And I've been in like a clinical leadership role there for about 5 or 6 years. And
Nice.
so part of that too is, I'll often get asked to speak, with news outlets or media outlets, and this was the one with the Utah Business Magazine that a common topic that I get asked to speak about is men's health.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons,
Yeah.
being a male in the field and treating other males in the field. And to be honest, too, I mean, I think what's interesting, our profession probably is pretty outnumbered in terms of like males to females.
Yeah.
I'd say it's less common, obviously, that there's males in the field. We are out there, though,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
And so often when that is a common request from a male patient or client is like, I want a male therapist, and so that is a population that I work with a lot. I work with everyone though too.
Cool.
I work with females and males, all ages really. I even see some adolescents. I do couples. I do a little bit of everything. But I've really, I'll be honest, like I said, I've been in the field for 12, 13 years, and I've changed a lot in those number of years, and my perspective on helping people, including men, and probably made some mistakes along the way. And
Sure.
as you learn and as you know more about people in general, how the human mind works, and what ultimately helps people and helps heal people. So yeah.
Amazing. And could I ask what pulled you towards this profession? Is there a story behind that?
Yeah. Probably a long one. I'll give a shortened version of it.
Sure.
And part of that's probably something I'm still working out with my own therapist, to be honest.
Yeah.
But no, I think growing up, I was always interested in people. I was always interested in why people do the things they do, and even including like, why do seemingly well-intentioned, rational people do sometimes things that aren't so rational? But I think like even early on, I felt, I'll give a little background, like personal background. I grew up with two brothers. I'm the youngest. We're your stereotypical like sports family. Very sports dominated. We all played sports competitively throughout our lives. And so I grew up in a space that was very like male dominated. And bless my mom's heart that she had to deal with that. But we played like baseball, basketball, everything. And one of the things I picked up fairly early, and maybe I didn't come to grips with it until I was older, was I was a pretty sensitive kid. And playing sports, and I'm 39 going on 40, and I think that just back in that day and age, like mental health still wasn't like super common, and maybe at least for men, I don't feel like at the
Yeah.
time. And again, but I always was like very sensitive, and I was a crybaby there for a while, and but again, in sports, you really, I don't know, say you can't be that way, but it wasn't sort
No.
of like, like tough it up,
Yeah,
work
you'd
harder.
maybe be subject to ridicule or criticism. Yeah.
Don't be a crybaby,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like a lot of that kind of thing, and so there was a time where you really try to just push that stuff down.
yeah.
I remember again growing up, one of the sports I played was baseball,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I was pretty good. But one of the things I remember I had a really hard time with, like, baseball's a really intellectual sport. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
have to really, like, I mean, be athletic and know how to play, but like there's such the mental game.
Yeah.
I always struggled a bit with the mental side of it, and I
Mm-hmm.
would get really anxious, and especially when you're up, you're batting, and
Mhm.
hitting, right?
Yeah.
And so I just, like, I always felt like I had a hard time connecting the dots of, like, and I think back in that day and age, it was like, well, just you got to train harder, you got to
Yeah.
work harder.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, I don't think it was until later I put it together of like, if I could just, like, so I think early on I wanted to help, like, adolescents. I wanted to help, like, teenagers and those that maybe,
Mhm.
and maybe even in the realm of like sports psychology or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of when I first started being like, well, how can I do that? And I wasn't
Yeah.
really good at science and math, and it's like, I wish I wanted to help people. And so, got my degree in social work, obviously. And I think my idea was I was going to try to help adolescents in some way, or teenagers in some way. It sort of morphed into, I didn't even know, like, again, what therapy really was at the time,
Mhm.
I think people who probably know me from back in the day, if they heard I was a therapist, they'd be like, what? That's just it was crazy, right? But that sort of started the journey, and I'm homebred, so I went here to University of Utah, got my degree in my bachelor's degree in psychology, sociology, got my master's in social work from the University of Utah as well. And I initially started working a lot with, like, substance use and addiction,
Mhm.
and really fell in love with it. And it just kind of turned out the way that I actually didn't, at least wasn't helping adolescents that much,
Yeah.
that age group, until later. And but like I said, I always just was interested, and I felt like, maybe there was, something that I could take from my younger years to try to help people. And that's how it started.
Yeah.
And it's morphed into this own thing of
Cool.
trainings and education, and then just become, like, just so fascinated with the human mind, and
Yeah.
how we operate, and very much so how we operate unconsciously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think
Yeah.
we have a shared interest in that for
Yeah.
sure. But I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
your level of education and experience goes much deeper.
Possibly. Yeah.
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 That's awesome. I'd love to kind of let's enter into that a little bit of what are the things that you've been learning and experiencing in your practice, maybe for you yourself and those that you're working with. You touched on what even happens in the subconscious, and
Yeah.
like let's start to get into some of those principles.
Yeah. Well, I think even one of the things, like I said, when being a male therapist in the field, you do get a lot of male client requests. I want to see a male because they will understand things.
Yeah.
And I think early on in my career, again, before I really understood this sort of idea of the unconscious,
Mm-hmm.
was I'm a man, they're a man, we can relate.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, right? And that's the therapy. That will be what it is.
Right.
And I think early on I kind of just leaned on that of, like,
Sure.
they're a male, so they must have gone through what I went through, and they're gonna assume that I went through the same or something, right? And there's
Mhm.
gonna be the synergy, and there is sometimes,
Sure.
right? I don't want to ignore that, but I also started realizing, like, we're all so different, and, like, our personalities are different, our life experiences are different. Like, I always thought it was interesting, like, like I said, I have two older brothers, but I'll see let's get and say a male client, and they have all sisters, or they only
Mhm.
have they're raised by a single mom, or they
Mhm.
maybe have uh you know two dads, or they have a
Mhm.
stepdad, or they have, like, all these little individual differences. What was their childhood like? Was it abusive? Was it pretty normal? I don't know, right? And I
Mhm.
would notice that, like, sure, I was sort of living, and the clients were also living off of these unconscious sort of templates of, like, how we all should just sort of think and be and
Mhm.
act, and And in psychology, especially psychoanalysis, is a field that I've really studied and gotten more training in. People think of Freud and think of things like that when they think of psychoanalysis, and it's so far beyond that now. But it really has to do with this concept we call transference in psychology. And if you've worked in a helping field, they teach you this idea of transference, and it's this fancy way of saying, like, we sort of live off of these unconscious templates that get created in our mind from early childhood, and it's based a lot on our early experiences with caregivers, so mom, dad, those sorts of things, and other experiences. So we internalize these experiences, and they create these sort of, I say templates, but kind of scripts.
Yeah.
But again, very unconscious. It just gets sort of put into our minds. And so, one way I could think of it is like if I had a bad, let's say I did a podcast before this one and I had a really bad experience with it, and maybe I felt like they were being mean to me or they weren't hearing me out, I could come into this interaction and be a bit defensive or be a bit, on edge or something. And then you guys are going to start being like, what's going on with this guy? Right. And so then you're starting to act a little weird and I'm acting weird. And it's like, what is, but we're not really what's going on here, right? There's something unconscious being sort of, we call it enacted between the two of us. And I always was fascinated that with therapy, there's, our personalities are formed in relationship. That's how we come to know ourselves. There's a saying, an old analyst used to have a saying, he says, there's no such baby without a mother. There's no such thing as that, meaning we're dependent on our caregivers, but that's how all relationships work. There's a level of dependency, and that's how our relationship gets formed. And so I remember thinking, that's the secret sauce of therapy. It's not I'm like doing something to someone. It's, we're working with relationships. Yeah. And they're entering into a therapy relationship with me. And so why are we not using that as, I say like a doctor, their secret sauce is maybe a medication. That's the active ingredient. For therapy, the active ingredient is the relationship. That's how you come to know yourself. You can only know yourself so much by yourself. Yeah. And luckily with a therapy relationship, we get to like slow it down and, I'm noticing that I'm getting a little defensive with you, and I'm noticing you're acting a certain way with me. Have you ever thought about what's going on here? And so I've found that, whether it's a man, woman, white, black, gay, straight, like they're all their own unique person. Yeah. We cannot sort of, and by the way, I get why we do have these scripts and templates. I think they're there to keep us safe, and they're there to protect us in some sort of way. So if it does go bad, I'm a little bit ahead of it, and I don't have to feel hurt. I don't have to feel rejected. I can be like, see, kind of what I expected, right? So we kind of live off these unconscious expectations, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Okay, yeah. I want to touch on the maybe differences or maybe perceived differences that maybe aren't real of working with men versus women, because this is something I see crop up from time to time. People are like, oh, traditional therapy is great for women, it's not great for men. I don't know if you hear these kinds of messages too, or see that or have insights on that, but that's just something that like it's come across my path a few times now, and it's like, oh, talking face to face is different for women than it is for men. Men need to be like working side by side, and then that's better for them to. And there's just all these things out there that are kind of challenging, I guess, what we would call traditional therapy. And I'd just be curious to get your perspective on that. Is that what you've experienced, seen, observed? Would you challenge it? Would you agree with it?
It's a great question.
Probably it depends, right?
No, it's taking me back to those, true, false,
Right.
It's like, well, do I have to choose one or the other? No, it's a bit of, I think more than not, it's probably untrue. Yeah. But I would be lying not to say, like I was saying earlier, no, there are some commonalities that you do see in patterns or trends that you do see with men versus women. And again, I'm always careful not to overgeneralize with certain things. But yeah, I think some of them, like, I don't know, this is what you're getting at, but like, men have a harder time opening up. Men have a harder time being vulnerable. Men have a harder time asking for help. I think the article that I was asked to speak on spoke about some of these sort of ideas, and I'd be lying not to say, yeah, that sure does happen quite a bit, but I've also known men who really don't struggle that much
Yeah.
with it. You know what I mean? Like I was saying, there's times when I'd be working with someone and I'd come in with my preconceived notion of, all right, so it's a guy, so like he's gonna be very intellectual and he's gonna be very much like advice kind of oriented. He's gonna have a hard time really tapping into his feelings. And not really at all. Like and or he comes and I'm in my mind thinking this is what he's gonna want to work on and talk about. He's like, no, dude, I just want to talk about my marriage, or actually my wife is actually having a harder time being the one to open up or something, or I just want to deal with this thing that's, you know, maybe not even related to any of that. And on the flip side too, like there's some women who struggle with those again stereotypes as well.
Yeah.
Some not, you know what I mean? And even doing couples therapy, it's so interesting. I'll do couples therapy sometimes and you'll see it like switch mid session or something, where it's like one is very closed off and one is guarded, and then something will switch where one gets vulnerable and then the other, you know, this is an interesting example I'll give sometimes of couples therapy, some of my experiences with that. You get that stereotype that the guy maybe is a little less vulnerable and a little less likely to open up. And then there is something in the shift in the session or something that happens where the guy's like, okay, I'm going to open up. And then almost the wife's like, whoa, I was not expecting that, or I'm not used to that. And then now they're like kind of closed off. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Right. We're just so like malleable and we're so different. And like I said, it really, for me, it's what I love about doing therapy is it's not like it's an investigative thing, but it's like, you're starting with it's like the, you know, age old, don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
Right. They come in and usually every person that comes in probably is struggling with anxiety, depression, some sort of suffering. And that's like the starting point. And then for the rest of the time, I'm trying to get to know them. It's like, what is giving weight to their symptoms? Is it because of they're a guy and they grew up in a very maybe male socialized world, but maybe not, you know what I mean? And so that's always the starting point. I think of it, you know, shout out Jonathan Shedler. He's a great Twitter follow. If anyone's, he's an analyst. He's someone who teaches a lot of psychotherapy. And he has this analogy where he says, you know, people come into therapy and they start as if it's a fever, anxiety and depression like a fever. And that's the starting point. Just like if you go to your doctor and with a fever, they don't come back and diagnose you with a fever. They try to diagnose the cause, you know? And so that's what we're doing. I'm not treating a fever. I'm treating a person, and they may be a male, they may be a female, but they may also what makes them tick. You know, I've had many males who grew up in very I don't know, emotionally open environments, very vulnerable, open environments, psychologically minded parents, and some not.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And so it's my job to really not treat this person like anyone else.
Yeah.
It's not a one size fits all sort of thing.
Yeah.
If that answers your question.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. When you talk about the root cause stuff, that's kind of coming back to maybe what's that unconscious, for lack of a better word, like programming or patterns, or you had a word for it. I can't remember what it was. The kind of, the script, right?
Yeah.
So what is the way that you go about helping people bring what is unconscious into awareness, into consciousness? And we've often quoted that Carl Jung very famous quote of like, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will rule your life and you'll call it fate. And that feels very at the core of what we're talking about here. So how do you go about helping people bring that to their awareness, and then even a follow on of like, once we become aware of it, then what, right? Now what do we do with it? So we can come back to that after we address the first part.
By the way, I love Carl Jung. I love that quote. I think about that a lot. It's a complicated question. It's a complicated answer. I think I come back to the relationship. You know, I come back to relationships. We are as we are in our relationships. Yeah. And so I kind of have this idea that, you know, how we are out, you know, let's put it this way, like meeting with a client, a patient, and how they are with me is how they are outside of the therapy room or the therapy relationship. And so I use that as sort of the active ingredient and the template. So, you know, try to think of a good example here. But so, for example, again, let's say a patient has, I don't know, let's say they had critical parents, right?
Mhm.
They've internalized that experience with their parents, and maybe they're a little critical of themselves. Maybe they kind of go through life and they're a little, like I said, on edge or critical of others. Maybe they're fearful of that, and so they develop sort of strategies to sort of kind of deal with it or kind of cope with it. And one common way is to just sort of accommodate others. You
Mm.
could think of it as like people pleasing in a way.
Mhm.
Um, and they go through their life, and again, it's not super conscious to them. They kind of just go through their life and they just sort of start noticing, I just feel kind of empty. I feel
Mhm.
like maybe my needs are never being met. Maybe I'm kind of always accommodating others' needs. But again, very unconscious, right?
Mhm.
And so they often will think, well, I'm going to go to therapy and see what's going on here. But they haven't quite like diagnosed this cause yet. Because there's also something I think about growing up where like it's important for us to rely on our parents. It's important for us to depend on our parents. We're one of the few species where our sole survival is dependent on our parents.
Mhm.
Um, if they're good, bad, whatever it is, we have to see them in a good light, kind
Yeah.
of. It's part of
Yeah.
our survival. So again, this just becomes sort of internalized into the psyche, into the body, and you go through life, but you start to feel kind of empty. And you go see a therapist. And I don't know what's going on here. I just want to figure this out. Bear with me, they're entering into a relationship with a therapist, just like a relationship with anyone else in their life. And so I use that as sort of this. I use the relationship for therapy kind of as a laboratory,
Mhm.
and it's a laboratory to better understand the person. And so when you say like, well, ultimately, what do we do? It's like I'm going to notice that I'm going to make comments to the patient or to the client of, do you ever notice this or do you ever notice that? And I noticed that they're kind of agreeing with everything I always say.
Mm.
and,
And
and
then you're noticing that.
and I'm noticing that.
Yeah.
It's like, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I noticed that, and I may even make a comment of that.
Mhm.
I noticed you really don't ever get mad at me. I noticed you don't ever really get angry with me. I noticed that you always just kind of go along with what I say. And I'm, and I'll say, I know I'm kind of smart, but I'm not that smart. Have you ever noticed this about yourself?
Mhm.
And sometimes you get yes, no, this. This is a very common one that I'll think about. Is there's times when maybe I'm misunderstanding something that the client's saying, and they'll say, "Oh no, like I'm sure I'm just not communicating it very well."
Mm. Right.
And I think any other therapist, I'm not saying there's bad ones or good ones, but would just sort of not even think about that comment. But I'll probably try to point attention to saying, it could be that I misunderstood you. Not that
Mhm.
it's your fault. I
Mhm.
notice you do that a lot. So I'm trying to now draw something to their attention that
Mhm.
is not within their conscious awareness that's happening within the relationship. One of the things that I think is so important to the work we do, it has to be an experiential process.
Mhm.
It can't be intellectual.
Yeah.
If I just say, hey, go read Carl Jung or go read Freud or
Mhm.
go read this book about this, not to say that's not helpful. It is helpful. I sometimes do that. But that's an intellectual practice. It has to be felt and experienced within me and you in the moment of, you notice this.
Yeah.
And it's like,
In relationship.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it's happening right now, right here in the here and now. And it's like, that's how we change. That's how we I'll say re-edit the script.
Mhm.
It has to be felt in the relationship, experienced in the relationship between the two of us. It can't just be an intellectual exercise like I'm a teacher and a student. And so you think about how do you work with the unconscious, it has to be felt and experienced in the relationship in the here and now. And any good therapist um, has to be able to go there with patients too. I think even I'm someone who supervises other therapists.
Mm.
And this is one of the things I think is really hard to do sometimes. I'll say, you got to work with the transference. If you're not working with the transference, you're only engaging in an intellectual exercise
Mhm.
and not a real relationship. Again, it's a real relationship. It's not a fake one. I know we all know this, but it's hard to really do that. I think it was Carl Jung who even said, could be Freud, by the way, something of like, you have to, you can only go as deep with your clients as you've gone with yourself.
Mm. Yes.
And so the other thing I preach with this is I don't do this as like, I'm this expert or this or that, but like, I go to my own therapy. You know, I
Yeah.
go to me and my wife go to couples therapy. Part of why I believe in it, I know it works because I've had the same experience in
Yeah.
therapy as well. And so, it being a real relational, experiential relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's so important, and thank you for modeling that. You know, I think if you're in the arena, yeah, and you're doing your work,
Yeah.
I think it just your ability to then work with others is just magnified, and there's this deeper sense of understanding, of empathy, of maybe seeing with eyes
Yeah.
that can see more deeply, right? Because
Yeah.
you're like, and while we all have such unique let's say life circumstances that maybe led to the things that imprinted on us, or our patterns or our behaviors, there are these kind of core common elements,
Yeah.
right? Of whatever the emotion might be, or
Yeah.
of these belief systems. I use that term. I actually want to ask you about this because when you talked about scripts, that's sometimes what I have referred to as these kind of core belief
Yeah.
systems.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say those are synonymous? Like,
I think so.
okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, I think so. I mean, I've heard, like I said, the depends on what kind of theory you're working with.
yeah,
In psychoanalysis, they call it transference. If you talk to
transference,
a lot of
yeah,
cognitive people, they'll use beliefs.
okay,
And you talk to there's some folks who use the term narrative.
yeah, yeah, or like the
Narrative type
stories,
therapy,
yeah,
stories. Yeah, yeah. But I think
okay,
it's all kind of along the same lines.
yeah,
I think. But again, I think the key word there is it's unconscious though.
yes,
Again, it's like water to a fish.
right,
You know what I mean? It's just we go about our lives and we don't think about it, but we don't feel good. There's something that's not
yeah,
feeling good.
yeah.
Yeah.
So on along those lines, I think this may have come from like childhood and adult development and those stages. And this is probably in psychology as well. Just this concept that as children, I think it was from what I heard or read, it was from the ages of 0 to 7, roughly, is when we pick up most of our core beliefs about, and our scripts, right?
Yeah.
The same thing
Yeah.
about ourselves, about the world, about relationships,
Yeah.
about, and one interesting component of this is with our primary caretakers, which you
Yeah.
referred to. It is safer for us to believe that they are sort of infallible than to believe that they are somehow flawed, because our survival depends on them.
Yeah.
And therefore, if a caretaker, a parent, acts poorly towards us, instead of as a child thinking like, whoa, something must be wrong with my parent, it is safer to think something must be wrong with me. And that's why they are acting that way.
Yeah.
But it's better to think that than like because at least I have this perception of like, I'm still going to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Even if it's abusive, even if it's messed up in some way. Right.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
First of all, you know your stuff. So I think I don't know if I think you're just as much of an expert too. That's like I'm kind of joking, but I'm kind of serious. I mean, even I know therapists in the field who sometimes just I don't know, they look at therapy as this we're going to give them advice and give them tasks without really understanding like developmental psychology of like like the stuff you're talking about. Like it's to some degree that's pretty high level stuff, right? Cool. So I really appreciate you saying that, and I think you're 100% spot on.
Okay.
I think in psychoanalysis they call it kind of protecting the good object. Again, because it's so important for our survival. We I think we do this automatically. We put our parents on a pedestal. You know? We can only see them in good, and we can't see them in bad. I mean, it can get pretty high level with some of this stuff where I think about you're saying, from 0 to 7, right? Some argue it's even, more so even just like infancy,
in the womb,
in the womb, even you can go far as back as that. You think about.
And maybe genetic factors too.
Yeah, it's and some other field of study. I'm sure you guys have probably known about like attachment theory. Really addresses this phenomenon. But part of this too is I think what you're describing, and I think this relates to therapy and or just how the mind works is we need to put things like in all good or all bad categories, right? Like you're saying, like most parents, not all, are a combination of good caregivers and maybe not so good caregivers, right? There are times when a baby cries, screams, needs to get their diaper changed, right? And they can't say it, right? but the parent knows, okay, I got to do something here. Either they got to, feed them, I got to change their diaper, I got to do something. And you get it wrong sometimes.
Yeah.
Or there are times when a baby needs to be fed and the mom's not around.
Yeah.
And they talk about this phenomenon of, they call it splitting. What you're describing in psychoanalysis is called splitting. You kind of split the good and the bad. So even as an infant, the infant can't make sense of it. So when I'm crying and screaming and the mom comes to me and nurtures me or feeds me, that's good mom. And when she doesn't come to rescue me, she doesn't come to do that, there's like the bad mom. And even a baby can't yet even distinguish between, they actually think it's two separate moms. You know what I mean? So they can't put together, that's the same person. And so they think that there's a good mom and a bad mom, like there's two separate moms.
Wow.
Part of developmental psychology is this idea of, well, they start to learn at some point, there's this idea of integration where, oh, that's the same mom. You know what I mean? So this is where we talk about sort of healthy attachment or secure attachment, or just there's a lot of psychoanalytic terms that I won't use because they really don't make sense. But they call it, they call it won't make sense, called the depressive position. And all that really means is that I can take in good and bad in my caregivers. So I can see my mom or my dad as, yeah, they're mostly good. They have some things, they're a whole person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I think when it's done correctly, it's not so much that I have to always protect the good object, but I can see them as good and bad. I can see that my therapist sometimes gets it right and they sometimes don't.
Yeah.
And I can integrate the two and I can work with the two. They don't know, my client doesn't always have to put me on a pedestal. They can get angry with me. And so that's how I recognize it in real time. In the relationship is, can they see me as, or are they just putting me on this pedestal as I'm good because they really need to rely on my survival? Yeah.
So do you kind of walk around interacting with people and you're going, oh, they probably have this, or this? You almost become this investigator, or I don't know what, or it's sort of, Sherlock Holmes, where he's looking at something and he's like, oh, I can see all these things going on. And you're just, is it hard to, or is it fine to just be like, yeah, that's probably what's going on? Or do you feel like you sometimes have to take that lens off of the world just to interact with people?
I get this question a lot. And it's a good question. I would love for my wife to answer this question. She'll say, yeah.
He's always doing it.
And I'll say, no, I don't. No, I don't do that. Like I said, the unconscious is a thing, you don't really, So part of me wants to say yes, and part of me wants to say no. There are times when the way I'll put it is after you've seen clients all day, it's I want to come home and just veg out and just not I just want to watch mindless TV or, I'll put a game on or something. And just turn it off. But there are other times where I'll say where I think when you do it so long, not that I'm out analyzing people or anything, but it's
kind of automatic,
it's just
right?
who you are.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's just, to be psychologically minded is not I think it's even, I have clients, it's just, they're not therapists, but they're just very psychologically minded. They think about these things. Some people don't, So I've come to kind of think sometimes I do need to kind of turn it off for my well-being or something. But other times I just it's kind of just, after a while it becomes I'm interested in this stuff, even when I'm not doing it, I read, I like podcasts, your guys, I hearing your guys' stuff, it just becomes part of who you are a little bit. Yeah,
totally. Okay, I want to come back to, we talked about helping people become more aware and to kind of see, oh, maybe you're noticing something about a person, and you start asking those questions and is that something that happens all the time or whatever, right? And they start to go, oh yeah, it is. And then do you get to the root do you try to get to the story, or the relationship probably of where did that originate and why is that there, and kind of help them discover that? And if so, if you do that, then kind of where do you take them from there?
Sure. No, again, good question. It's One thing too, I'll say like a kind of a stereotype of certain types of therapy is like, am I going to have to come in and just talk about my childhood all the time?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, is that what I'm going to have to do? And the way I think of it is, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe not. I
Could
do a
be.
lot of like, yes, we're going to work in the here and now, but we're also going to work a little bit in the here and then. I think it is important to kind of get to that root cause.
Yeah.
And again, most of the time it comes from something that happened in their childhood, not always necessarily.
Sure.
And the way I say it too, like the word, a word that kind of, I think, can be somewhat overused. And I try to use it when I really feel it's important, like trauma, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all probably at some point in our life have experienced some type of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
The way I think of it is at some point in all of our lives, we've probably been victimized in some sense or regard. And that may have something to do with the cause, in quotations, cause. It may not. Like I said, though, I do think it is important that you have an understanding of where this all came from. Because there's something I think, I'll put it like this. You brought up that example about sometimes, right, you have this, instead of maybe acknowledging that your parents or maybe have done some things bad, you internalize it, right? And you think it's something to do with me. One of the things I think is important to recognize the causes for is there's something thought of as like depression. And I think of it like as a pathological depression. I think what that is when you start to feel like it's me, I'm bad. This is all me.
Yeah.
And I think there's something more I think of as called like normal, healthy mourning or grieving, to where you can mourn and grieve what happened or didn't happen to you. And I think you have to know the cause, what actually happened in reality, to start to move from a place of I'm wrong, I'm bad, I'm defected, to, oh, now I can actually mourn and grieve. So not just knowing the cause, but like I can mourn and grieve what didn't actually happen. So, again, I put my parents on this pedestal. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe we can move to a place where we can actually mourn and grieve what you didn't experience, what you would have wanted to experience with your parents. So you can move on and live a freer life. I think of the unconscious as this thing where we can't fix the unconscious. We can't cure the unconscious. It will always be at play. But we can sort of increase our awareness.
Yeah.
And then if we can increase our awareness, we can live a bit more free. We can make choices.
Oh, I love
So we can sort of, if you want to change something, you have the freedom to do it rather than living on autopilot. But if you don't know the cause and where it came from, you can't do that. And you'll continue to probably make the same mistakes. And you don't have to change it either if you don't want to.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I'll come to. Some people, it's like, well, now I know. What do I do? It's like, whatever you want.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's, I think my wife shared this with me, and it's exactly what you're saying. The more awareness we have, the more agency we have.
Yeah.
Increased awareness equals increased agency. And that's such a powerful insight.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I'm wondering if we could touch on, there was a topic that came up in that article, and it was about AI. And using technology. And this was interesting to me. I don't know if this is still current, but I saw a little article about like the top uses of AI among, I don't know what the demographic was, but the number one was for like, it was like mental health support.
Self-help.
It was like therapy, air quotes, right?
Yeah.
And you had an interesting insight on that. And I would actually love to talk about that, because I've used AI a little bit for like bouncing ideas around and being interested in this same field. Well, what about this? What about that? I haven't gone so far as to start to say, hey, here are my personal struggles, and what advice do you have for me, or whatever, or like what do you see here? But it sounds like a lot of people are using it as like emotional support or a therapeutic resource. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a very hot topic discussion in our field and in the world, obviously.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I like you. I don't know if I use AI personally a whole lot. A little bit. I'll do a little chat GPT.
Yeah.
My wife uses it all the time. Like write an email for me, or and kind of make it sound like this, and this.
Yeah.
But no, I've heard of more people using it as like a pseudo therapist.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with this or I'm struggling with that. And I don't want to misquote because I'm not an expert in AI, but my understanding is like, again, I don't know if it's Chat GPT or what it is, but AI tends to be like programmed to kind of tell you what you want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's, don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what I've heard is, so sometimes people will say, I'm struggling with this thing or this or that. And it's like, you're just doing a great job. Keep it up. And
it can be very
like,
validating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I am doing great. And I'm like, that's good, I guess.
Yeah.
But again, my fear is it's not based in reality. If you're using it more as a therapist, I guess you can say. One thing I was talking about earlier, right, is, or this comes up all the time. People will say, you worry that AI is going to take over your guys' jobs? And I'm not.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just because the way I practice, because again, the way I think of things is it's AI isn't a real relationship. It has to be a real relationship. Like when I'm working with a client or a patient, like I also have my own personal feelings. I don't agree all the time with what the patient is saying or doing or whatever it is. In fact, I think if I did, it would sometimes do harm to them. And that's one of our golden rules. Do no harm.
Yeah.
I've also heard some studies about those who tend to have maybe more of what we call psychotic disorders, who will use these chat GPTs and actually have some really damaging effects, to where they'll start believing, they're telling this person they're maybe quote unquote delusions and things like that. And it's like, you're right. You're right. One of the things with working with that population that you're doing is something called reality testing. There's maybe something in your mind that isn't actually happening, right? And so you can see where this can go very awry with something like Chat GPT. This is a phrase I heard, and I think this speaks to what real therapy is versus maybe like an AI therapy is. We're not there to make you feel good. We're going to try to help you. I'll put it this way. We're not there to help you feel better. We're going to try to help you get better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think ChatGPT is going to make you feel better. I don't know if it's getting you better, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's insightful. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'd love to just circle back to your practice and just ask broad question of,
Sure.
And with let's focus on the male population specifically. What are just some of the most common things that you're seeing? And again, this is hard because it's a generalization. But like, are there certain themes or certain just common things that you're seeing come up with men in the here and now that are just, maybe it's trending a certain direction, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many factors at play in modern living.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of male isolation. We've seen a lot of tons of mixed and weird messages about masculinity in the media.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people like working from home, and that's part of that isolation thing, the male loneliness epidemic thing. Loneliness in general, right?
Yeah.
But it's been sharper incline with the male population. And then just statistics around depression, suicidality, anxiety, all of that has just been on the rise. And then with technology, which is supposed to connect us, but actually it doesn't result in those fulfilling relationships that we all need.
Yeah.
So I'm just dumping a ton of things that have been on my mind. But like, if there are certain things that you kind of been like, man, I've really been seeing this a lot, I think that might just be insightful for us. Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. A couple things, and you're kind of hinting on a couple of them already. I mean, a common one I'm getting, and partly I'll say this is also something I can relate to in my age demographic.
Yeah.
I'm almost 40. I'll get a number of, and it may not be their like primary complaint, that they come in for. And a lot of times it's that's how therapy works. You come in for something and you realize, oh, there's something else going on.
Yeah.
But like I mentioned like loneliness and isolation. I'll hear more and more sort of, not to, it's hard to say what age group, but like late 30s and on, sort of having this sort of I don't know, not midlife crisis, but almost like like I realize I don't really have any friends. Or I have like my wife, I have my kids, like I have a social life in a way, but it's all sort of surrounded around again, wife, kids, or like work people. It's like I know, John, who's at the cubicle next to me. And it's like when you ask him, like, well, who's your friends? And they'll say, well, I mean, talk to the guy, John. We'll sometimes go get a drink or something after work. And like, yeah, any friends from this or no, and should I, or,
Yeah.
and then you get to it and it's like, yeah, people really want connection, but they like don't know like where to go or how to go about it. It's like one of the questions I always get, and sometimes from women too, but it's like, so what do I do? Like, how do you make friends? It's like such a, and it's always like, yeah, it's a good question, and, I want to make friends, but like, I don't know, like I'm 40 years old and like, what am I going to go like join a club? Like, I don't, like, should I take up golf? Should I, and it's very interesting, right? That's a very common one I get. And it can lead to a lot of things, or, when we start exploring it of like, well, why, what's stopping you from joining a club, or what is stopping you from doing this? And sometimes, the whole sorts of things you don't realize about someone. And the other one I get too is you brought up some of the other sort of stereotypes about men. And I find there's like this younger population. What is that, Gen Z? I think it is what it is. Yep. And they seem to be a little more, living online and living. So their isolation is a little different. Is like they have friends, but they're kind of online friends.
Yeah.
Play video games maybe with them, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But even too, there's a lot of these messages I feel like that's coming out about what it is to be a man, and what do you want to call it? An alpha.
Yeah.
Or this or that, and there's this new group of younger men that are like into their appearance, and like I got to be jacked, and I got to be look a certain way, and in half the time I can't understand the terms they use. But
I heard one, looks maxing. Have you heard that one?
Yeah, that was the one. I had to ask. I was talking to a young. I'm like, what does that mean?
You're like going to ChatGPT. What is looks maxing?
I know. I'm over here like, oh, I know what that means. Yeah, I know what that is. Which is interesting. It's very interesting, but they're putting such an emphasis on external things, right? Like that's how, but I think all of it is related to connection.
Yeah.
Whether you're old and it's like older and it's like, I just don't have friends and I want to make friends, or it's young and this is how I think I'm supposed to make friends. Everyone wants to connect. And I think people have sort of their ideas of like, or again, call it these scripts of like, this is how to connect, or this is not how to connect, or this is the only way I can connect with someone. And so those are like pretty well explored with people I work with of like, well, what do we do with this? You know, or maybe can we re-edit? Is there another way you can learn to connect with people? But it is, I think that's the main thing, I think. And again, I think COVID probably had a little bit to do with some of this. I think people started getting very more isolated after COVID. I still think we're kind of dealing with some after effects of that, to be honest, that I don't think people realize. Like you mentioned, people working from home a lot. I don't know how to feel. I like working from home, but I can get where that can get pretty isolating. But yeah, it really comes back to connection. People feel a little disconnected, and again, women too. But I do notice that quite a bit with men.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, that's right there is part of the reason that my co-founders and I were like, we need to help people reconnect, and not just like we felt this need to go deeper than the superficial connections that are a little more easy to come by, right? Like, maybe it is like, a few of us go play a basketball on Tuesday nights or whatever, and that's totally great. I'm not bashing that at all, but it is hard for those relationships to go very deep, especially. I mean, it takes a long time to start to get into, hey, how are things going and whatever, right? Yeah. And so we wanted to just fast track to that because I think in that place of where you're able to be more open and vulnerable, that yields a deeper kind of relationship and connection. And I think it's the kind that we all really yearn for. And that leads me to maybe just kind of we'll close out with this thought, the need for connection. And I think of psychologically, mentally, our health, we have just these core needs. And so often our maybe maladaptive behaviors or our yearning for having our needs met can lead to maybe things that are actually destructive in nature, but
Mm-hmm.
we're going after them because we're trying to just meet a need or fulfill a need.
Yeah.
Like I have a need for connection, I'm not getting it. Well, maybe I can find it in some other or artificial or unhealthy way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or I have a need for relief from the discomfort or pain that I'm feeling. So instead of coping or dealing with that in a healthy way, I'm going to look for a substance that can just numb that, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's alcohol or
Yeah.
any number of things,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
What are some of those core needs that you identify or that you see with people, and if you can speak to maybe like what are the healthy ways to fulfill those needs?
Yeah. Again, you know your stuff. Well, I think that is the core need. Again, this has been studied and researched, and there's now neuroscience to support a lot of this. Again, not to go that far back, but even like Freud, he used this word libido back in the day.
Oh yeah.
And and his idea was something not what it turned out to be, but he did say that we have these certain drives. He would use the word drives, and for his was, initially was related to things like sex and things like that. Obviously that was debunked, and I think people realize the main drive has always been relationships. That's what I think now libido is just a metaphorical term for relationships and for connection and to feel seen and to feel heard and to feel understood and to be with someone. And I said like dependency, part of what that is also dependency, that, when I'm struggling, I know I can turn to someone and they're going to be there for me, or they're going to at least hear me out, or they're going to be able to be someone I can talk to. And I think that's at the core. And I'll add one other thing I think goes hand in hand with it from a psychological standpoint. You were mentioning like what do people do when they feel disconnected? Part of when I think you are connected with someone, that it gives you a sense of, we were talking about earlier, like agency. I feel like I have control, and I can do things. I can conquer the world, or maybe not that, but I can do a lot of things. Like there's freedom. But when I don't have connection, I think there's a sense of feeling helpless and feeling like I don't have agency and I don't have control. And I think that is often why people turn to something like drugs and alcohol, because it's kind of built in the idea that, well, I can't control this. I can control this. Like alcohol, drugs, that's always there for me. I don't have to worry. It's always there. I can always buy it. It works 100% of the time.
Right.
Sometimes I go to my wife, or I go to my spouse, or I go to this, and they're there sometimes, and most of the time, right? Whatever. But like, this works 100%. ChatGPT kind of works 100%. This is a little unpredictable, so it's risky. And that's what I think of. That's the definition of vulnerable right there. It's like, it's something that is a bit risky to do, to ask for help or join a group, or like, I'm going to go, join this here brotherhood. And I don't know, like, it's a little scary. What I like what you guys do, and you mentioned like, what can you do? Like, I talked about this in the article, growing up, your social circles are like built in for you. Like I said, I played sports, so like, I didn't have to worry too much because like my friends were there for me. I like groups like yours that it's like, we're here for you. You just have to like, we're here. You know what I mean? So I like when things are built in like that. So I'll often encourage people, try to find groups like that that are already kind of formed. You don't have to do as much work, not that it's not important, but you know, they're there for you. You just have to make the call, or you just have to shoot the email or something.
Cool. Right on. Well, I appreciate it. If you had any last thought that you want to throw out there to the group, feel free. Otherwise, if you feel like we covered a lot of good territory, we can wrap.
No, I just want to again thank you and appreciate you for having me on. And like I said, I do therapy, and so I do it. I work at the University of Utah. I also have a private practice. Cool. And so if there are men out there who are thinking about doing therapy,
where can they find you? What's the best?
If you can actually just look up my name, Bryce Herrera, probably LCSW therapist. I have a website. I have a University of Utah profile. I've been on other podcasts. I've done some other things, so you can look. I have some stuff, all that stuff online.
Amazing. All right, thank you, and we'll link all that in the notes. So appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.